Can you tell us a bit how this film came about and what was the kind of origin? How did you think about conceiving this film and what was the process of making it?
So, I had no agenda to make a film. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. I had no agenda to make a film. I made films before, but what happened was I was suffering a debilitating depression at the time, and I had to stop my job for 9 months or so. And a very good old friend of mine, Jack Oliver, he was studying photography, and he invited me out to the Brecon Beacons, which is this very beautiful place in Wales, in South Wales. We drove there. He was taking some photographs. I started filming on my phone because the film was shot on iPhone, and most of my films have been shot on iPhone. And I was just filming flora and fauna for a while. And then in the evening, just as evening came in, the sky completely fractured, and darkness, like the hand of God extended its arm down and unleashed some sort of cataclysm where I was. And 30 foot, 50 foot, what would that be in meters?
I have no idea.
About 10 meters.
Okay. So 10, 50 meter trees were being felled all around me. Wild horses started galloping out of the shrinking forest towards me. And in that moment, I closed my eyes and continued to film. And I filmed the end sequence of the film with my eyes primarily closed. And the horses galloped past me so close that if I extended my arms like that, I would have been able to touch them as they galloped past. And in that moment, because I wasn't mentally well, I didn't care if I lived or died there. And in that moment, I completely surrendered to the idea of maybe being hit by a tree, being stomped over by a horse, or carried away in the wind. And to this day, it's the most sublime, beautiful experience of my life. Conversely, when you're editing a film, even if you film something, you can't just show something that was a sublime experience for yourself when you filmed it. You have to work very hard to capture some of that essence. After that day, that's when I knew that I had something to build towards. So I had this ending, but I had to make what preceded it, what built up to that point, and that was the next year and a half, 16 months, where I was editing pretty much dusk till dawn every day, and shooting concurrently during that time as well.
This film comes out around 2017, right?
Yes.
And this is at the same time in film we think of this new genre or this new concept called eco cinema or eco film.
Mm-hmm.
And this Sleep as Our House is always seen as a kind of prominent example of that. What does eco cinema or eco film mean to you, and how do you think people started recognizing this trend and they thought Sleep as Our House had a role in it?
Well, I'm very invested in the sustainability of the planet, as everybody should be. But at the same time, I don't want my film to be dogmatic or to be a sermon. I want my films to primarily be sensorial and experiential. I want it to be an experience. I want it to be a world that you can enter. But if it makes you think about those things, about humanity's urge to predominate something that we are part of, and in the process we're suiciding ourselves, essentially, that's a good thing. But it's not something I consider. And in terms of labels, I'll leave that to critics and academics.
Okay, that's fine, but I guess there's still, in terms of the way you make this film, no crew, relatively very little carbon footprint. And I think you were saying earlier, we had a class, the budget is based on the gas you paid for your friend to drive you into getting beacons and so on.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how the Blu-ray packaging is made out of plastic and what kind of sustainable materials.
Yeah, I spent a long time trying to work out how to make a Blu-ray package that was as eco-friendly as possible.
Yeah. And I guess to me, when I saw this film in a cinematic, theatrical setting, I was struck, first of all, how it made me feel as I was feeling nature sensorially. I was in a place, I heard the place, and I guess structurally also the film, we place too much importance to plot and story and character and stuff, and that's one way of kind of organizing films. That's one way of organizing temporality. Here we have duration, but we have also start with a very strong presence of water. We move on to mountains. There's always air. We hear air moving, and then we culminate in this kind of electrical storm. Those fire. So you're covering these kind of four elements.
Yeah.
Of nature. How much?
And ether, I hope. And ether, I hope.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, absolutely.
Was that the kind of structure you formulated the film around, or?
Intuitively, that is what happened. As I said to you before, Henry, I think that there is the potential for everybody to be a conduit or channel some kind of perennial wisdom, some hermetic wisdom. And children always had it. Children have not been adulterated by the modern world, and they can hold on to that. Shamans can hold on to that. A lot more people in the East can hold on to that. But in the West, predominantly, we've lost that connection. We become calcified, adulterated by all the nonsense of the modern world. But yes, there are the elements there, but it wasn't a conscious thing prior. It's something that I noticed later.
Okay. Do we have questions from the crowd? From comments?
I have two. I'll start with one and continue with the second. So in all this, I can see how much time you spend in post-production with all the masking and morphing and superimpositions and fades and all the rest. And in some ways, you said you wanted to translate that sublime experience that you had into, what viewers can experience. But in all of that, I feel a strong touch of romanticism in terms of German romanticism of the 19th century. So the very idea that you look at the nature and you try to turn it into something mysterious again. Was that intended, or did it just happen?
I wasn't thinking about any artistic movement or any specific artist when making it, but I think subconsciously it percolated through, because I was talking earlier about Caspar David Friedrich, among others, and yeah, I adore their work. But we were talking earlier about if I was to criticise the Romantics, even though I adore their work, it would be that it remains figurative. That in order to invoke the vastness of these vistas, the sublimity of it, they have to have this small figure to foreground it. And I think that, yes, there is a romanticist element, but also like a modernist element, and utilising cinema where instead of there being a figure in the image, you become the active participant and you can emblazon yourself upon the images and become the avatar in that space. So you are essential to complete the film.
Well, then my second question is basically answered, because I was exactly asking myself why you left the human being completely out of the picture, but that question is answered.
No, I'd like to add to that. I think that absence is by far the most potent form of presence. I'm sure that everybody in this room has experienced loss of a loved one, or something has been lost, and the absence is more profound than a physical presence. It weighs heavy on you, and I thought that paradoxically the best way to address the Anthropocene and humanity was actually to negate it. And in terms of the philosophers that I admire and the kind of philosophy of mind that I feel an affinity with, I believe that absence is generative. I don't think it's lacking. I think that our perception, our limited modalities for perception, actually permit emptiness or void to become something so sonorous and vibratory and pulsating and deep. It's not absence. It's full. It's a plenum void.
I guess it's an interesting choice to choose a medium that's supposed to show things to suggest absence. But I mean, this is half a joke, but also it's quite serious. It's like when we look at film history from Antonio Nitiozu and so on. It's like filmmakers who are kind of telling us stories, and there is always this kind of strong presence of absence or a void. As you were saying, it's possibly the most difficult kind of sensation or suggestion to achieve, again, in a medium that is about presence and about visuality and so on. I don't know if you want to respond to this, but it just came to me again.
But I think, I adore Antonioni, and I think the thing that's most present in his work, for example, is the distance between people. But he's using the figure to express the distance between people that they're unable to connect. I'm a Brissonian.
Another filmmaker who's obsessed with the absent.
I've always felt it intuitively when making, but you read notes on the cinematograph and it's all there. The eye is passive, the ear is sensual. Our senses are impatient, and we need to play on those impatiences. And as I said, I always want to return to the sense of the body, but hopefully even transcend the body. And while I spent a very long time technically working on the images, it's the sound that carries it is vital. And you could have, I've said this so many times, but you could have the most perfect images in the world, but if the sonic choice is not right, if it doesn't marry, then you remain earthbound, you know. And I want people to leave after watching my films, hopefully, like they're walking 10 foot off the ground, you know, that, and nothing less. That's what I aspire for. And I think that the ear is far more active. It's far more active than the eye.
Yeah. We had a question at the back, I think. So.
Thank you for your film. I had a question about what you're having to say about the ability to surrender, the provocation to surrender.
Mm-hmm.
This notion of embodying actively a kind of surrender. And you encourage it as a viewer, and you're talking about it as a maker of the film, as being present in the space while the film is being made. But I'm interested in talking about for over a year afterwards, the editing, compiling, and the putting together of this film that could speak to the experience you had. How do you hold on to a sense of surrender while actively making choices of sequence and montage and duration? If you could speak to a bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
In the most beautiful moments of editing or working with sound, I got to disappear for a while, you know, and then I return and whoop, there's something new. Something has appeared that somehow has been channeled through me. That's how it feels in the best moments. It can be very mystical, and it's always intuitive. But if I'm able to just surrender and almost treat editing as if I'm listening to some long piece of music, it becomes a meditation. Yeah, in the best moments, I get to disappear. I think more than anything, and obviously this is a paradox, because I'm speaking in front of people about a film that I've made, but I think more than anything, what I try and do it in my work is disappear. Yeah, so that's surrendering. For me, when you manage somehow, and you can't force it. If you force it, it's harder. It's much harder to get into that state of consciousness. You have to not want it, not feel like you need it. You can't force it, but when it befalls upon you, you become a conduit for something that feels numinous and much larger than you, and you're just the instrument for it to manifest, you know. I often feel, especially with this film and a couple of others, that I didn't make it, you know. It almost feels like something ancient, you know, that for whatever reason, I was able to be the conduit for, and I just spat it out, you know, over 2 years. Yeah, that's how it feels. It feels like an expulsion.
Hi, so this is my first time watching the film, but when I've read about it, I've often heard it described as a slow cinema horror film. And as I was watching it, there was I don't know, maybe you know who Edward Abbey is, the writer and the conservationist. There was a quote from a book called Desert's Solitaire that very quickly came to mind. I pulled it up. It's kind of what we thought of it. That says, "This sweet primitive land will metaphorically breathe a sigh of relief like a whisper of wind. When we are all finally gone, and this place and its creations can return to their ancient procedures, unobserved and undisturbed by the busy, anxious, brooding consciousness of man." And that, I suppose it sounds kind of sad, but it feels like a return to a rightness rather than a wrongness, and that to me is not horrifying, it's kind of comforting. So is this a horror film for you?
No, someone else has labelled this a horror film. You know, a load of people ran with. I think if a filmmaker is deciding the genre of their own work and what it should be labelled, they should become a critic and stop making movies. That's the critic's job. That's people outside to label it however they feel. The film has, in some festivals, it's been labelled a documentary. There's docu-fiction, hybrid documentary, horror. All these different things. At the end of it, I just hope that people think it's still cinema. It's still a film. It may not have actors in it. It may not have dialogue, but it's images moving with sound in time. And that's it. Yeah.
Can I ask Al a question? It's a movie about like a slow, long death. And in some ways that could be considered frightening or dark or very disturbing, but I didn't really perceive it that way. But did you feel disturbed by it while you were making it?
No, I was disturbed while I was making it. But I wasn't disturbed by the film. The film was a balm, it was a salve, it was healing, it was therapy. A lot of people say that they're afraid of death, they're afraid of dying, but I think most people are not afraid of death. They're afraid of two things. They're afraid of suffering before they die, and they're afraid of looking back on their life and feeling like they didn't live. Death itself, is such a impenetrable inevitability. We don't know what it's going to be, I can only speak for myself, but things that are unknown are just so beautiful. Things that we can never know. They're the things that tantalize and beguile me and that I'm enamored with. Anything that's very concrete and solidified in what it actually is, that we've determined what that thing is, often means very little to me. I just love mystery. I don't think death in and of itself is a morbid thing. Death in and of itself affirms life, because I did an interview yesterday where I talked about this, that death, in a sense, is becoming landscape. It's us becoming landscape. It's animalia becoming landscape. It's trees falling and rotting, and this beautiful rhizome of mycelium rising beneath the ground and meeting the terrain and absorbing the bark of that tree. and it's returned to the earth, and then from that flowers grow. Like death affirms life, you know. Death is essential for life to renew itself and to continue. So I don't think it's a morbid thing. I think people fear it, but I don't think it's a sad, morbid thing. I think it's just one part of the inextricable, endlessly boundless and mysterious zone that is reality, you know, and we're just all on the crest of a wave.
Thank you so much for this film. It's a film that I think about all the time. I don't know how many times I've watched it. So it's just such a pleasure to be here and a privilege. I guess I do apologize. I have two questions. One is I noticed some choices in this version that are different from maybe one that was available on your website when it first came out, and I was wondering if you could talk about those. And then the second part is just that I know that you're making a new film, and I mean this film is such a huge accomplishment. And yeah, just what are you trying to do differently for the next one?
Hey, thank you very much. You know, and you alongside everyone else has seen a new version of the film because of the sound sync issue. In terms of the remaster, there was one main thing that I wasn't happy with in the original version, and that was the sound during the shot of the horse, which is a close-up of the eye. For whatever reason at the time, and I don't think a lot of people got it, I was trying to do something quite Brechtian and be aware of the clunkiness, and I wanted for a moment during that section for the film to become aware of itself, and for the audience to become aware that we're watching a film before we then descend into the storm. And I think that was a mistake. And I think a lot of people saw it as a technical failure because the sound was quite weak intentionally, but a lot of people didn't think it was intentional. And so I decided when I remastered the film that I would embellish that sequence with much more sound design to get rid of that feeling. And then there's some other sections where I just removed little mistakes that I actually really liked. You know, I'm a big advocate for Brian Eno's what are they called? Those cards, oblique strategies. Brian Eno did this card system with oblique strategies. You know, giving artists ideas. You know, if you're stuck with what to do next, you just pull out a card from this deck of cards, and one may be on a very mistake as a hidden intention. Speed up, go slower, that sort of thing. In terms of the new films, are you referring to the Sea Behind the Head? Yeah. With that, I sort of see almost all my prior work, including this film, as how can I make films that don't rely on semiotics. There's as little symbology, iconography, and signs as possible, so people feel lost at sea, and they're having to map the territory as they go. With the Sea Behind Her Head, I'm trying to. It's been a research-led process for the first time. I've never done active research during this film, and so concurrently, while making the film for the past 6, going on 7 years, I've been actively researching many different things: quantum loop theory, Paleolithic history, red sprites, upper atmospheric phenomena, which is incredible. You know, these red sprites, they occur just before there's like a fulmination of lightning during a storm, and they're bright red, and they're the size of cities, and they look like giant spiders or octopuses in the sky, with long tendrils. Super interesting. And they're there for like a fraction of a millisecond, so they were only recently discovered. And there's other upper atmospheric phenomena as well, like green elves and blue jets, weird things that occur like tens or hundreds of miles above an actual thunderstorm. They all seem to be interconnected through some sort of electromagnetic activity. So I've been researching all those things, thinking a lot more about climate change, thinking about Moby Dick, thinking about Georges Bataille's L'Histoire de l'Île, and a few other things, and through that the film's coming together. But yeah, with this film I'm trying to actually use symbols, mainly theological and theosophical symbols, and combine them with other symbols, or approach them through a different lens to undo what we already have preconceived notions of what they mean, so they become unknowable again. So rather than having a lack of symbols, there are symbols, but they're subverted. I've always tried, there's the poem at the start of this film, the only text in the film. I've always tried to make worlds. I think that's the most noble thing you can do as an artist, is to make a world. And with the current work that I'm making, I'm trying to create myth out of old ones. Thanks so much.
Maybe.
Yes, I was talking to you.
Yeah, so it's more a remark than a question. It's just the end of the film. I feel it's like an apocalypse. And the way that I feel this apocalypse is quite rather close to what I can feel when I watch The Turin Horse, for example. The use of sound and the idea of nothing. It's not the fear of death, as you explained. Death is a natural expression, but more the fear of void and nothingness. So I don't know if you can elaborate on this, but yeah, it's more.
Mm-hmm. Again, I can only speak for myself. When I've actually experienced the closest thing to nothing, it's been pure bliss. Disappearing for a while. I'm terrible at meditation, but there's been a few times where I've been able to disappear for a little while through meditation, like certain kinds of breathing, like holotropic breath work, or some transcendental meditation, some Eastern traditions. I don't think nothingness is something to be feared. You know, well, I think it was Walter Benjamin. He said, we're dead for billions of years before we're born. You know, why should death matter? You know, because you know you've been dead for eons. You know, before you're born, and did you care about it? No. But who's to say? You know, no one knows what lies after we slip beyond the veil. I'm glad you mentioned the true norms. You know, I have a real love for Bellatar, and I love that film especially. And I can understand when he made that film, he was like, I gotta stop. That's where it stops. Where can I go from here? And I felt like that a lot. You know, it was a few years after making this film where I felt I didn't have another film in me. You know, and I was okay with that. I was absolutely fine. Yeah, you just need to be true to yourself and what you're feeling, and things that you're able to rationalize, things that you can quantify, qualify in an intellectual sense. Obviously there are exceptions, but on the whole, I don't think they're as valuable as things that are intuitive and resonate emotionally.
Thank you. I think maybe we can squeeze out one more final question before we turn out.
Your question.
Just very simple question, I guess. Just wondering about the title, because why that title? Oh, just because I don't personally maybe I don't see the exact connection between the images you see in the movie and the title, so I just wanted to,
So about 6 months into the editing the film, I was just editing the film and entering into this beautiful meditative state that sometimes I'm able to be privy to, and I kept on hearing this voice in my head: sleep, house, her house, sleep, house, her house. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like that would be a good title. And then I essentially was like, yes, that's going to be it. That's going to be the name. Even though at that point I only had a few sequences done, it just felt intuitively perfect to me. And then, must have been nearly a year later, I thought, wow, I've nearly finished this film. I gotta Google it to make sure it's not being taken by anything else. And then I found that there was an album, Sleep House His House, by Current 93, the band, and there was a book, Sleep House His House, by Annika Van. And I ordered the book, but I told myself I wouldn't read it until I finished the film. And I thought, fuck, I thought I had a really good title, but it's sort of been used, just the sexes have changed. But it was so right, I was like, I'm gonna stick with it. A lot of people think that it was directly like some sort of like I listened to the album or read the book and that was the decision to title it. It wasn't. I may have stumbled upon it and then subconsciously it bubbled to the surface at some point, but I honestly cannot recall ever listening to Current 93, any of their stuff, prior to Googling. And the same with the book. But I really like the book. It's a beautiful book. It's semi-autobiographical, very dark, very melancholic, very lyrical. And I actually ended up editing some parts of Sleep as a House in the last few months, listening to Sleep as His House, like because there's this one track which is like 20 odd minutes, and it's almost spoken like a mantra. Sleep has his house over and over, and it was really, really good to get into like a certain mindset.
Thank you so much, because we have to end this here. Thank you for this beautiful film, and again, apologies.
Thank you.